And we're back for part 2, all about member value, non-dues revenue, and new association business models. Let's jump back in. Randall, do you really think any of that is realistic? Given the current staff, culture, and talent at associations, they already were saying, the mom and pop shoppiness of many associations. The joke is that many associations, the bulk of the staff is theater majors, where you're asking people who already don't have the business acumen, the board isn't stacked with that MBA, whatever, marketing, whatever talent. You're asking them all to step aside and give up their roles for people who are experts in sourcing and procurement and running these. This is a completely different entity needing different brains.
I just think that given the craziness of what's happening in the sector right now, okay, that there's a spot for conversations. And it could very well be nothing comes of it, right? It could be nothing comes of it. But I think that it's something that's worthwhile. It may be that out of those, 10, 12 different ideas that I just shared, it could be that only one of them is something even valuable. There's got to be some market research. Gee, might our members be open to this? No one's going to suddenly change their bookkeeper. Everyone's got their own bookkeeper all figured out and everything. No one's going to suddenly change their lawyer. They already have lawyer. But what if we're able to do something that actually provides value that people would pay for? Okay, where over time we might move to a model that has this. For other associations, it might be, there's a kind of a bit of a funny parent joke, which is, gee, there's two ways to teach a kid to swim. One is to give them lessons and they sort of tiptoe in the water and get comfortable and all that. And the other is to push them in the water and they learn how to swim, right? I'm not really a fan of the other one, but that's where you can rent outside brains to actually help that. Now, I saw Bruce, you stuck up your hand and I don't know if you're a doubter or a pragmatist or whatever, but I'd love to hear your views.
Sure, thanks, Randall. So I work with associations to help them create sponsorship programs to increase revenue and member value. So a lot of what you say definitely resonates with me, and I think your kind of competitive analysis that you made at the beginning of the program was brilliant, because when I do competitive analyses for associations, I'm coming up with 40, 50, 60 competitors, other places that members, sponsors, and exhibitors could go for value other than the association. And you touched a little bit on the challenge with boards, and I'm glad that Rania brought up that point as far as associations, kind of mom and pop or other association models. The part of the challenge that I see in my work, and both when I was on staff of an association and now as a consultant, is there is not the will to think like a business among the staff. So an association where I used to work, which was not a mom and pop, was a $20 million association about 20 years ago. The CEO hired a senior VP of business development. And actually, one of the things he was tasked to work on was a shared services program. Made perfect sense. Based on what you said, Randall, makes perfect sense. VP level folks on the association staff went into the CEO's office and said, boss, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't know where we're going with this. We're a nonprofit association. Our members are not for profit. Why do we have a senior VP for business development? And then when that senior VP for business development worked with the CEO to promote me a couple of years later to VP of corporate partnerships, one of my colleagues on staff who had been on staff for 25 years at the VP level came up to me and said, oh, Bruce, I just saw the announcement that you're VP of corporate partnerships. You've gone to the dark side. So one of my biggest barriers in advancing that program that brought in $1.8 million on the association's $20 million budget was my colleagues on staff. So they truly did not believe we should have this program, that we had sold out. We were just fronting for companies that were just going to sell crap to members. They did not believe in the program.
So yeah. Hallelujah. Okay.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we convince?
So this is a lot easier than you might imagine. I mean, Ronnie and I have led a number of different retreats. For senior leaders, specifically in an organization, to develop alignment so that everybody's on the same page. And without alignment, there's problems. What the heck is this new role, etc. But your CEO is ahead of his or her time.
Yep.
right? By saying that this is what we need to do, but they're behind the time in terms of not bringing everybody along on the journey, right? They weren't part of the solution. They didn't understand. Okay, and that was a mistake with due respect to all the other good things they do. And sometimes when you've got a visionary who says, this is the North Star, it's over here, right? They're really good at being a visionary. But how do you start to land that airplane? How do you get all the passengers on the bus? That's where the retreats come in, right? And my God, they're certainly not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than having a senior VP of business development being frustrated and unable to achieve their objectives and eventually quit, and everybody else is saying, well, this isn't us, and so on. Alignment. Okay. And by the way, alignment in associations, as everyone probably understands very, very well, is not just a question of let's get the senior staff in a $20 million association aligned, but it's also to make sure that the board and the volunteers are sort of, not sort of, but really on the same page, and that there's a communication plan so that the ideas and engagement up from the members and the communication down and within the community of membership also is aligned, right? But listen, one thing is the vision and the strategy. So we're talking about here, this might be a North Star. How might we actually build a shared service, program, if you will? Well, I'd say a step behind that is to say, let's take a look at the business model of the organization and see how or if this might be the right thing at the right time. And number two is, okay, let's do a proof of concept. Let's try and sketch out what that happens to be. And you're right, most association leaders and their teams, they're very good at actually getting stuff done. But sometimes they're not so good at getting new stuff done because of the issue of bandwidth and particular skill sets on the team and everything. And that's where you could rent brains, okay, to help with that, right? And sometimes, by the way, it's not that's hundreds of thousands of dollars on a big consulting project. Sometimes it's just some coaching, whispering in the ear, right? Hey, this is what your team can do, because most leaders know the answers, but they don't know the right questions to ask. So it may not be as egregiously difficult to sort of do that initial exploration as you might expect. But getting alignment, okay, the retreats, the board, the senior leadership, the key volunteers, and there's the problem's been solved before. We've got the nibblers, the younger generations, or the people who are the people who are just testing you out, if you will, and then all of a sudden they might decide to actually join, right? And then they're sort of in that infancy period of time. They're just testing you out, really. Okay, and then they may be more involved later. They attend more events, they volunteer, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of associations that have made amazing progress with respect to their member recruitment in terms of setting expectations. Made incredible progress with respect to what's the onboarding journey, okay, to get people up to speed on the value that they can access as part of it, to embed them into the community, if you will, right? It's not just a series of emails or come to our presentation, our new members presentation, or the call from the president or the membership committee chair or something like that. But there's all kinds of different things that are part of that. And so I think that's very, very important. And then continuing the conversation once they finish up with that initial onboarding and orientation and they found their place, etc. And no one likes to be surveyed to death, right? But on the other hand, that's one of the tools you have. There's only so many calls you can take during the day as a member if you're doing online or Zoom-based focus groups. But people like to be heard, and certainly once you get people to volunteer, that makes a huge difference.
Chris, you have a question?
Randall, I appreciate the conversation and hosting this today. I've been in the association world for a number of years in the corporate sponsorship, corporate partnership arena. And I attend a lot of these events, and what I hear a lot is there's this need for non-dues revenue. And, you know, in the sense of, in hearing that, is there a decline in the revenue that, what it leads to me is there's a decline in the revenue coming into associations. And so there's this need to drive revenue from other non-due sources. And the challenge I see out there, and it may be more rhetorical, is, you know, are the boards and the CEOs having this discussion? Because what in the world I've lived in the association world and doing what I do, you often see that their associations are reactive, that we have a conference, we have a budget we need to meet, and therefore we need to go out and, you know, sell this many registrations and this many sponsorships. So it's very reactive. And what is being described in these new business models is very proactive. It's a dirty word in associations. It's called selling. And it's going out and proactively securing, and Bruce has been very involved in corporate partnerships where you go out and secure entities for longer term foundational funding levels. And that's a kind of a revenue model that has proven, at least in my experience, to be sustainable, and could in theory be, you know, transition to the shared services role. I think the challenge that I see, and was touched upon earlier, is, are these conversations, is there recognition at these senior levels or in these boards that it requires a different skill set and a different approach? And are these boards and CEOs open to that? And secondly, you know, there are certain folks who can bring this type of person on. And the ones who really need the revenue are probably in that 0 to, you know, $2 to $5 million range that don't have the resources to pursue this activity. So how do you bridge that gap? I mean, how do you change that mindset within an organization, because there is significant competition out there?
This is great. So let me try and unpack, okay, some of what you said. I'll provide my perspective, and listen, this is just one perspective. Everyone who's listening to this is coming to it from another perspective. So, you know, with your own history and knowledge. So there's a couple things. First of all, it's a question of you know, if you're an expert on driving the car, that does not mean you're an expert mechanic, right? You know all about traffic signs. You know, you can be a race car driver. You know all about how to, you know, go around other cars safely, and, you know, who knows whatever else race car drivers do. But you might not be an expert on the details of what's under the hood, right? The best ones, of course, are, but not everybody is. And so you know, I used an expression earlier on. You know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. The best ones, the best executive directors or association management companies would stick up their hand to the board and say, I think this is something that we should put on the table. We've got a strategic planning cycle. We've got an annual board retreat. We've got a fill in the blank, etc. Let's learn about it. Let's bring in somebody who could talk about this topic. So at least we could start dealing with the issue of awareness of the possibilities. That's one part of it. For boards that do have a bit more of a strategic bent, excuse me, it's really more, okay, this is what we want to do. It's now in the plan. Let's figure out how to execute it, right? In that case, it's a question of saying, gee, we don't have the skills inside. Let's bring in let's rent some brain cells to have more detailed conversations as to what the steps might actually need to be to actually get started on this, maybe to do some initial exploration, et cetera, and then report back to the board. I think there's another pathway as well. Okay, if we think about what it means to say sell sponsorships or partnerships, you know, when it really comes down to it, the only reason why these partners are actually writing a check is because they think it's going to benefit their business. We will sell more stuff. I know I'm being kind of blunt about it, but essentially that's what it is. Yeah, they're part of the industry. They're just contributing. Yes. But very much there's almost all the cases, there's some commercial angle to it, that there's a greater affinity to the suppliers, the partners, products, and services, that they actually get leads, whatever it happens to be. But there's that kind of business justification because they got to justify it internally. So is it not possible that the question of the sales effort for those particular services, what if those were outsourced to the partner who's actually who might actually be the provider? So for example, let's just say, and this is a super hard one to do, so I'm just going to take it because I know that it's not easy. Let's just say you're an association of I don't know, carpenters, okay, and everybody, or electricians, everybody's got their own business, their own bookkeeper, and you decide that after appropriate due diligence that you want to start that kind of thing. Well, on one hand, what you can do is you could just hire dozens and dozens of bookkeepers and accountants, and you could buy lots and lots of technology, right? And then what you can do is you could start selling it to all of these people. But truly, is that really the best way to start? Maybe there's a way that you could build a strong partnership with an organization where you're outsourcing and white labeling those services, and they already have the technology, and they already have the skills, and they already have the methodologies, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe part of the resources are paid for by the association, part by the partner, right? It doesn't have to be all in or all out, but I think that there may be a pathway there that, once again, it's part of the conversation, right? Now, I'm not saying let's outsource everything to one partner. This is the preferred partner for accounting and bookkeeping, okay, or for whatever it happens to be. No, I'm talking about a hybrid kind of situation, if you will, where at the very beginning it may very well be that not all parts of the deliverable are being done internally, but you're outsourcing that to a provider that you trust. Why would they want to do that? Why would they want to put skin in the game? They're looking to grow their business too, right? And they could do it in, as part of the team that delivers, or they could do it as an outsider. So, Bruce, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, and I agree with you, Randall, that, and your response to my question earlier, but yeah, useful to have a retreat or whatever to get everybody on the same page. I think my friend Chris mentioned something that's also really useful. It's often not the staff with the right skill set to be able to implement any sort of non-news revenue business program. And I was talking to a recruiter a number of years ago, worked for associations, and I said, well, when you're looking to fill a position at an association in non-news revenue or business development or sponsorships, do you ever look to the private sector, somebody from a marketing agency, or maybe somebody who's even managed sponsorships with one of your sponsor companies? And she said, oh, we can't do that. And I said, why not? And she said, because the association said they are only going to hire people who have association background. They don't want to hire anybody from the marketing sector, the business sector. So it just perpetuates the same challenge. And just kind of one other related thing, VP of marketing that I know, who's worked for a fairly large association, said, well, Bruce, I am VP of marketing. I don't really market to our members. I kind of inform our members of our products and services. And kind of to your point earlier, Randall, I think, associations think they are single source, the be all and end all. It's like, if we inform them, they will come. So even somebody VP of marketing with a sizable national association is, I don't really market, I inform. So this lack of business savvy that, folks like Chris have, and the organization he's worked with have been very fortunate to have his skills. Most associations don't hire people with business savvy or marketing savvy because they think that's the enemy, that's the dark side. They sell, we inform, even though, Randall, as you said, associations sell stuff all the time, but they don't see themselves. They see themselves as providing information. We don't sell, we don't do business.
So I would say, certainly in my years, and I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm not sort of like over the hill either. In my experience, there's been a bit of a shift, and to executive directors anyway, who actually do have some business acumen and do actually come from outside and have decided that they want to move into the corporate space. So it takes an awful lot of effort to sort of start a locomotive, but once it's actually going, it's a lot easier to push it. Right. And so I think we're seeing a bit of that there. I totally get what you're saying. I will say, though, that, just the whole finance, technology, marketing. Take marketing. There's so many new concepts. The concept of a member journey. Well, thank you very much. In the corporate world, they call it a customer journey, right? So the issue of looking at all the touch points and examining touch points and improving experience and everything. They call that, customer experience in the business world. Well, thank you. We can call it membership experience. I think, though, that so often people are hired into an association role from the corporate world, and they have no idea of the issue of how to work in a membership-based organization with a very large and geographically spread out volunteer base. They don't understand, for example, of the dynamics, for example, between a regulator and a professional association. They don't understand, for example, that the business model isn't grow, profit, but there's actually, it's the balance scorecard. There's a bunch of things that are actually going on there, right? And because of, the members tend to be longer term, okay, that there's all kinds of interesting relationships that sort of animate how you can actually get stuff done. And so, taking somebody from the corporate world and plunking them into the association space is absolutely doable. But I think what's critically important is has a person actually held roles in an association on the board as a volunteer, right? What's that onboarding process? We've got a whiteboard. We've got a white paper on onboarding, for example. What's the onboarding process for that new employee, right? How do we sort of ramp them up beyond that initial orientation, if you will, so that they know, how they can meld the knowledge they bring in from outside to this very different structure than what they might actually be used to, right? So I don't think like it's like it was, like 10 years ago, where this is a way, that's them, we see this also in the government sector, right? We see this in the in some partnership structures as opposed to corporate structures. All these have different dynamics, and you move people from one way to the other, and you don't tool them up in a way that gives them a chance of success. Obviously, it's doomed to failure, or at least it's certainly suboptimal. On the other hand, if you don't bring in these people, you really, really miss the opportunity to translate concepts and learning from a different way and make a substantial difference. James Gleick, in his book Chaos, he observed that the scientists that made the greatest impact are those that got to the top of their field in a particular area, then shifted into a completely new area. And that new perspective made a substantive difference to the impact in that new area where everybody else was thinking about the conventional wisdom, right? They weren't disruptors, but they were just able to look at things and bring their tools and thinking in a way that was impactful, right? But when you move into that new area, whether it's in science or leading an association, right, you need to understand what the buttons and levers and knobs are, right? And there's been too many, at least in my experience, examples, over the decades of there not being that proper onboarding, there not be the expectation setting and some of the other things that one would, one needs to be successful.
Okay, my question, Randall, is if you go and do any research on non-dues revenue anywhere, if you go to the library, if you do a quick YouTube, Google search, every single book, video, expert lists the same ideas. The same 5, 6, 7, it's always the same. It's not different lists, it's the same, right? Sponsorships and merch and booths and whatever, Is it just that? Is it that the non-dues revenue piece isn't like the innovation lab? Is it like hiring or sales or customer service where there's just best practice, you have your to-do list, you do it, and it's set in motion?
So listen, we're talking about the shared service model, which is one way of getting new dues revenue. That doesn't seem to be on the list. Okay, that's my point. It's not on the list. Where the heck is it?
Because it involves tremendous transformation, Randall. Where is something between sponsorship booths and sponsor a webinar and completely revamp, recreate your business model, restaff,
Okay.
recalibrate? And
let me get on my high horse here. I'm getting hot here just thinking about it. transformation and digital transformation, because we've been talking about transformation, oh my God, for like 10 years now, okay, is not putting in a new CRM or association management system. It's not about, well, we're going to go hybrid in our office. This is not digital transformation, because all it does is focus on, let's implement the system and get the benefits of a particular system, right? When we're talking about, gee, we need to do some digital transformation, let's actually focus on transformation. And if we think about what transformation might mean, this, I think, is one of the areas that I think deserves to be on the table. There's another one as well. We haven't even touched the idea of gain sharing and outsourcing of and repositioning training as a revenue source. We could spend more time on that if you like, Rania, right? But I think all of these things need to be on the table, right? If we're going to talk about transformation, that's what we got to talk about, right? And the fact that people may or may not be fully equipped, that's why there's people, well, like us, for example, who can actually be part of that conversation. Now, just to be clear, we're not in the business of doing, consulting on transformation and putting in teams of 100 people to make that happen. We're a pretty small organization, right? But we're small and mighty. And we're very good at whispering in people's ears and saying, by the way, what do you think about this? What do you think about that, etc. And by the way, here's the process. And here's a framework that you can use. And watch out for this vendor, or whatever it happens to be, or this is the way to get the most out of, or here's the retreat, or any of the other kinds of things that are that are part of that, right? And I think that's kind of the first step, right? We got to say a conversation should be had, right? It's not just let's do more sponsorships. Oh, we got to do more partnerships. Oh, we're going to increase the dues or do a multi-year renewal, or we're going to we're going to do, and then whatever it happens to be. It's not the flavor of the day, right? We have to have sponsorships and partnerships. We have to have, certification revenue. We have to have our, the annual conference revenue and so on. But how else might we transform the actual business model? The two ideas today, number one, we've talked about already, is shared service. The other is outsourcing or hybridizing the ongoing training.
Randall, you talked about not digital transformation, but transformation, but let's do pivot to digital, and the newest digital is AI. We're talking about association staff, maybe not having the most up-to-date digital skill set. Can you speak to us about what opportunities associations should be aware of and take advantage of with regard to AI? On that note, we're going to pause here, this part 2, on member value, non-dues revenue, and new association business models. We'll pick up with more Q&A in part 3. And if anything we talked about so far resonates with you, if you're curious about business coaching, about bringing in us to train your team, about a conference for us to speak out, do reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. You can email us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30, and we'll see you back for part 3.